Vaulted Truths, Episode 2. It was a Tuesday evening in October when everything Lauren thought she knew about her life turned out to be a carefully constructed lie. She did not find out through a text message. She did not find a receipt in his jacket pocket. She found out because a stranger called her husband's phone, and Lauren picked it up. And the woman on the other end of that call said 4 words that collapsed 11 years of marriage in a single second. She said, "Is my husband there?" This is her story, and the vault is open. Lauren was 34 years old, and by every visible measure, her life looked exactly the way she had always hoped it would. She and her husband Marcus had been together for 13 years, married for 11 of them. They lived in a beautiful 4-bedroom house in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and wide sidewalks. They had 2 children, a daughter named Ella, who was 8, and a son named Cooper, who had just turned 6. Lauren worked part-time as a dental hygienist, which gave her enough flexibility to be present for school pickups and soccer practices. Marcus was a regional sales director for a medical supply company. His job required travel, sometimes 2 weeks out of every month, and Lauren had long since made her peace with that. She trusted him completely and without question, the way you trust someone after 11 years of building a life together, after children, a mortgage, and 1,000 ordinary Tuesdays that felt like the solid, unshakable foundation of a real marriage. She always described Marcus as steady and dependable, exactly who he appeared to be. He called her every night when he traveled, he remembered anniversaries, and he coached Cooper's soccer team on weekends. He was the kind of husband that Lauren's friends would mention, half joking, when they complained about their own. She never took it for granted, and she genuinely felt lucky. That deep, settled certainty that she had chosen the right person is what made what happened next so completely devastating. Because the more certain you are, the further you have to fall. It happened in the 3rd week of October. Marcus was traveling. Atlanta, he had told her, a 3-day conference for regional directors. Lauren had put the kids to bed, cleaned up the kitchen, and was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine and a book. Marcus's personal phone was on the coffee table. He had left it at home, which was unusual, but not alarming. He had his work phone with him, he had told her that morning. She was not paying any attention to it until it lit up late in the evening. She glanced at the screen. The name that appeared was not saved as a contact. It was just an unrecognized number with a Georgia area code. She almost did not answer it. She picked it up only because she thought it might be someone trying to reach Marcus about something important that could not wait. She pressed accept and said, "Hello." There was a brief pause on the other end, just long enough to be slightly strange. And then a woman's voice said, "Oh, hi. I'm sorry, I must have the wrong..." And then she stopped. And then she said, "Wait, who is this?" Lauren replied, "This is Lauren. I'm Marcus's wife. Who is this?" The woman on the other end went completely silent. The silence lasted so long that Lauren pulled the phone away from her ear to check if the call had dropped. It had not. And then the woman said, very quietly, "I think we need to talk. Because Marcus is my husband, too." Lauren said later that her first reaction was not panic or even disbelief. It was a strange, almost clinical calm, like her brain had decided to process this information very slowly to protect her from the full impact of what she had just heard. She sat on that couch, did not move, and said, "Tell me everything." The woman's name was Diana. She was 36 years old and she lived in Savannah, Georgia, over 200 miles away from the house where Lauren was sitting. Diana and Marcus had been married for 4 years. They had met at a work conference, the same kind of conference Marcus told Lauren he attended regularly. Diana knew Marcus by a slightly different version of his name. She knew him as Mark Holloway. A small difference, small enough to be invisible, but large enough to build an entirely separate identity around. Diana had found Lauren's number because she had gone through Mark's personal phone that evening, trying to find a restaurant reservation. Instead, she found a contact saved under a name she did not recognize, which turned out to be Lauren's sister. When Diana clicked on the contact and saw the thread of messages, she understood immediately what she was looking at. She did not scream. She sat down on her own couch in Savannah and dialed the number at the top of the thread. The number that Marcus had called every single night he was away. Because calling Lauren was part of maintaining the architecture of the lie. It kept Lauren trusting him, and it kept Diana thinking he was somewhere else. It was the single most consistent thing he did in his double life. and it was the very thing that blew it all apart. The two women stayed on the phone for nearly 3 hours. Lauren described it as the most surreal conversation of her life, talking to a stranger who was not a stranger at all, comparing notes on a man they had both believed completely, and discovering the precise ways he had kept the two lives from ever touching. Different cities, slightly different names, 2 phones, and a work calendar that he controlled entirely. He'd been running this for 4 years. 4 years of parallel lives, parallel marriages, and parallel versions of himself, and neither woman had seen a single crack in the surface. Marcus came home on Thursday evening. He came through the front door the same way he always did, rolling his carry-on behind him and loosening his tie. His daughter ran to him, and he picked her up, kissed her, and called out for his son. He was completely, entirely relaxed. Lauren stood in the kitchen doorway and watched him, feeling something colder than anger. She felt like she was watching a performance, seeing for the first time how good he actually was at this, how practiced, how completely without tells. She had spent 48 hours preparing for this moment. She had not called her family or a lawyer yet. She had spent those 2 days in a state of focused calm, getting the children organized, making arrangements, and making absolutely certain that when Marcus walked through that door, she was ready. She put the kids to bed early, telling them Daddy was tired from his trip. Then she came back downstairs, sat down at the kitchen table, and placed his personal phone directly in the center of the table. She sat down across from it and waited. Marcus came into the kitchen expecting the ordinary end to an ordinary return home. He stopped when he saw the phone on the table. Just for a fraction of a second, his face changed. And then it smoothed back out again, almost instantly. He was that good. He pulled out a chair, sat down, and asked, "What's going on?" Lauren looked at him across the table and said, "Diana called." She watched his face do something she had never seen it do before. Collapse. Not dramatically, but quietly, like a structure that had been under too much weight for too long and had finally given way. Marcus did not deny it. Once Diana's name was spoken and the shape of what he had done was clear, he did not try to minimize it. He sat at that kitchen table and just deflated, like the lie had been the only thing holding him upright. Lauren asked him one question at the end. She asked him which life was real. And he told her, honestly, that he did not know anymore. That somewhere along the way, he had lost track of who he actually was. Lauren stood up, told him she needed him to leave, and held the door open until he walked out. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Lauren's life. She did not handle it cleanly. There were nights she sat on the bathroom floor after the kids were asleep and felt a physical grief. There were mornings she got the children dressed and onto the school bus on pure muscle memory, operating below conscious thought, just doing the next necessary thing. The logistics alone were overwhelming. She retained a divorce attorney, started unpacking their finances, and discovered a second credit card, a separate savings account, and expenses that mapped perfectly against his fake travel schedule. She contacted Diana twice more during those early weeks to compare information, ensuring they both understood what they were dealing with legally. Those conversations were painful, but oddly necessary. Diana was the only other person in the world who understood exactly what this particular betrayal felt like from the inside. The children were the hardest part. Her 8-year-old daughter noticed everything, but said very little, which was somehow worse. Her 6-year-old son was mostly confused, cycling between missing his dad and accepting the new shape of things. Lauren told them the truth in the simplest way possible, that mommy and daddy were not going to be married anymore, that it was not anyone's fault, and that both of them would always be loved completely. She said it calmly. She did not cry in front of them. She saved that for the bathroom floor. Lauren went back to work full-time 8 months after Marcus moved out. Not because she was left in a financial crisis, but because she needed to. She had spent 11 years organizing her life around someone else's schedule, someone else's travel, and someone else's fiction. And she needed to remember what it felt like to build something that was entirely hers. She was offered a senior position at a dental practice she had been with for years, and she took it without hesitation. Within that first year, she discovered she was extraordinarily good at her job.
Her patients trusted her.
Her colleagues valued her, and 6 months in, she was promoted to a practice management role with a significant salary increase. She also, slowly, began to rebuild her sense of self. She started running, not just for fitness, but because it was 1 hour every morning that belonged entirely to her. She traveled without planning around someone else's calendar. She relearned, one small thing at a time, what her own preferences actually were, separate from the identity of being someone's wife. 2 years after that Tuesday night in October, Lauren said something profound. The worst thing Marcus did was not the betrayal itself. The worst thing he did was make me doubt my own perception of reality. When you love someone that trustingly and they lie to you that deliberately, you lose your confidence in your own ability to see what is real. Getting that back, learning to trust my own eyes again, that took longer than anything else. And it was the most important thing I ever did. That is the truth that was locked away in today's vault. A woman who answered a phone call on an ordinary Tuesday evening and discovered that the life she had built with complete love and trust had been constructed on a foundation of elaborate fiction. Who grieved fully, got her children on the school bus every morning anyway, went back to work, and reclaimed her confidence 1 mile at a time. Lauren did not become someone who hates easily. She became someone who trusts carefully, which is different and actually better. She became someone who knows the difference between steadiness and performance. If this story reached you, if you have ever loved someone completely and been deceived completely, drop a comment below. You do not have to share the details. Even just saying, "I understand," is enough. The vault is open and we are listening. If you are new here, new stories open every single week. Stories that someone tried very hard to keep buried. Subscribe so you never miss when the vault opens. And remember, no matter how long it stays locked, the vault always opens.